Her father looked her in the eyes and said, "You're the only thing I have left to sell." And then he did it. Sophia Hayes was 22 years old when her father handed her over like a suitcase full of cash, payment for a debt he was too cowardly to settle himself. No warning. No apology. Just a car ride in the dark and a door that closed behind her. The man she was handed to. Rafael Cortez. You've heard the name. Everyone in this city has. The kind of man people cross the street to avoid. The kind whose phone calls get answered on the first ring, because nobody dares let it ring twice. Sophia walked into his world expecting a monster. What she found broke every story she'd ever told herself about what she deserved. This is the story of a woman who was treated like she had no value, and the dangerous man who showed her father exactly how wrong he was. Stay with me until the very last word. Because what Rafael does next. Nobody saw it coming. Hit that like button and drop your city in the comments. Let's see how far this story travels. The drive took 40 minutes. Sophia counted every one of them. She sat in the back of her father's Audi, arms wrapped around herself, staring at the city light smearing past the rain-soaked window. Her left cheekbone throbbed. Her bottom lip was still swollen from 2 nights ago, the last time she'd asked Daniel Hayes a question he didn't want to answer. She'd made the mistake of asking where they were going. He'd told her to sit down and be grateful. Grateful. That was the word he used. Daniel Hayes was the kind of man who volunteered at charity galas on Saturday and came home Sunday morning with whiskey on his breath and cruelty in his hands. He had a firm handshake and a generous smile and a daughter he'd been erasing since she was 16 years old. Sophia had stopped fighting it somewhere around year 3. It was easier to disappear than to keep bleeding. "Don't embarrass me," her father said from the front seat. His voice was flat. Practiced. The voice he used in boardrooms. Whatever he asks, you answer. Whatever he says, you agree. Do you understand me? Sophia said nothing. Sophia. I understand. The car turned off the main road onto a private lane lined with old trees. Iron gates appeared out of the dark, tall enough to make a statement, already open, like they'd been expected. Like this had all been arranged long before tonight. Because it had. She'd pieced it together over the past 2 weeks. The whispered calls behind closed doors. The way her father had stopped looking at her directly. The envelope of cash he'd slid across his desk to someone she didn't recognize on a Tuesday afternoon. She hadn't understood what it meant then. She understood now. The estate came into view and Sophia's breath caught despite herself. She'd expected something cold. Industrial. A place that looked like what it was. Instead, stone archways lit by warm golden light. Manicured grounds disappearing into the dark. Fountains catching the rain. The kind of wealth that didn't need to perform itself because it simply was. Her father parked. Killed the engine. Neither of them moved for a moment. Get out, he said. She did. The rain hit her immediately. The dress he'd made her wear was thin, something presentable he'd said, and she'd understood immediately what that meant. She crossed her arms and followed him to the front entrance. The door opened before they reached it. A man in a dark suit stood in the frame. Late 50s, silver at his temples, eyes that catalogued both of them in under 2 seconds. Mr. Hayes. His voice was neutral. He's waiting. They were led inside, marble floors, high ceilings, paintings that cost more than most people's lives. Sophia kept her eyes moving, cataloging exits the way she trained herself to do in any room she entered. Old habit. Survival habit. 2 doors at the end of a corridor. The man knocked once, then pushed them open. The office beyond was firelit and quiet. Bookshelves floor to ceiling. A desk that commanded the room. And standing near the window, hands clasped behind his back, watching the rain, Rafael Cortez. He was younger than she'd imagined. Taller. Dark suit, no tie, the top button of his shirt open like formality was something he tolerated rather than needed. He turned slowly when they entered, and his eyes, dark, completely still, moved from her father to her. He didn't smile. "Daniel," he said. "You're 14 minutes late." Her father straightened. "Traffic. You live 12 minutes away." The silence that followed was the loudest thing Sophia had ever heard. Raphael didn't move immediately. He stayed by the window, glass of dark liquor untouched in one hand, and he looked at Sophia the way someone reads a document, slowly, carefully, without reacting. She kept her eyes down. Her father had told her to. But she could feel the weight of Raphael's attention like a physical thing, pressing against her skin. "How old?" Raphael asked. 22, her father said. "I wasn't asking you." A pause. Sophia looked up. Raphael was watching her directly now. His expression was unreadable but his eyes were sharp, the kind of sharp that didn't miss anything. 22, she said quietly. He nodded once. Then his gaze moved to the bruise along her cheekbone. Tracked down to her arms. Her wrists. The way she was holding herself, slightly turned, protecting her left side. Something shifted in the room. A temperature drop so subtle she almost missed it. "Those are fresh," he said. It wasn't a question. Her father made a sound, half laugh, half dismissal. "She had a fall." "I have eyes, Daniel." Raphael's voice didn't rise. Didn't sharpen. It just stopped, and somehow that was worse than shouting. "I'm speaking to her." He looked at Sophia again. Did he do that? She felt her father's presence behind her like a heat source, the specific heat of warning, of consequences, of what happens if you say the wrong thing. She'd learned that heat. She'd been calibrating herself against it for years. But Raphael was still watching her. And there was something in his face that she had never seen directed at her before, not pity, not desire, not irritation. Something closer to recognition. "Yes," she said. One word. Barely a sound. Her father started to speak. Raphael raised one hand, a small gesture, barely a movement, and Daniel Hayes went silent mid-syllable like a switch had been cut. "We're done here," Raphael said, eyes never leaving Sophia. "Excuse me. The meeting is over. You can go." Her father sputtered. "We had an arrangement. You had an assumption." Raphael finally looked at him, and whatever was in that look made Daniel Hayes take a physical step backward. "An assumption I never confirmed. I agreed to hear your proposal. I've heard it. I'm declining it. Leave. You can't just leave, Daniel." Still quiet. Still controlled. "Before I change my mind about how this conversation ends." The silence stretched for 3 full seconds. Then her father, Gregory Vale, Daniel Hayes, whatever name his cowardice wore, walked out the door. And the door closed. And Sophia stood there, shaking so hard she could feel it in her teeth, in her fractured certainty about what was supposed to happen next. Raphael turned back to the window briefly. Set his glass down. "There's a doctor on staff," he said. "Her name is Dr. Reyes. I'm going to call her." Sophia stared at him. "Why?" He glanced at her. "Just for a moment." "Because you're hurt," he said. "And because your father clearly never thought there was a reason to do anything." Dr. Reyes was small, precise, and kind in a way that didn't ask for anything back. She examined Sophia in the office while Raphael waited in the hall, a detail so unexpected that Sophia almost asked someone to confirm it. The most feared man in the city was standing outside a door, waiting, because a woman he'd just met needed privacy. It didn't make sense. Nothing about this night made sense. "Bruised ribs," Dr. Reyes said, pressing carefully along Sophia's side. 2, possibly 3. Not broken, but they'll hurt for weeks. The cheek is superficial. Lip will heal. She paused, and her voice gentled. How long has this been going on? Sophia looked at the wall. A while. Years? She didn't answer. Dr. Reyes didn't push. She wrapped Sophia's ribs, cleaned the cut above her eyebrow, gave her something mild for the pain, and spoke to her in a low steady voice about rest and ice and not lifting anything heavy. Normal things. Ordinary things. The kind of instructions that assumed Sophia had a tomorrow worth protecting. When she left, Sophia sat alone in the firelit room. A woman named Camila appeared shortly after, 30s, quiet eyes, dark clothing, and introduced herself simply as someone who worked in the house. She would show Sophia to her room. Her room. Sophia followed her upstairs without speaking, trying to process the architecture of this night. The order in which things had fallen apart and then strangely, inexplicably, not. The room was enormous. White linens. High windows looking out over rain-dark grounds. A bathroom all marble and warm light with towels thick enough to disappear into. The closet has clothes, Camila said. Call down if you need anything. 0 on the phone. She paused at the door. He's not what most people think. Sophia looked at her. Mr. Cortez, she added. I know what it looks like from the outside. But there are lines he doesn't cross. She seemed to weigh her next words. Rest. It'll make more sense in the morning. Then she was gone too. Sophia moved through the room slowly, running her fingers along the bed frame, the windowsill, the edge of the closet door. Making it real. Checking that it was real. She found the lock on her door. Tested it. It worked. From the inside. She stood there a moment with her hand on the bolt and something broke open behind her ribs, not the bruised ones, deeper. Something that had been compressed for so long she'd forgotten the shape of it. She locked the door. She took a shower so hot it hurt. She found an oversized shirt in the closet and pulled it on and got into the enormous bed and pulled the covers to her chin like she was 6 years old and the world was small enough to hide from. Sleep didn't come for hours. But when it did, for the first time in longer than she could remember. She wasn't afraid of the morning. She woke to sunlight. Real sunlight, wide and clean across white sheets, and for 3 seconds she didn't know where she was. Then her ribs reminded her. And everything else followed. Someone knocked softly on the door. Miss Hayes. Mr. Cortez wanted you to know breakfast is ready. No pressure. No pressure. She repeated the words in her head. She'd never heard them directed at her before. She dressed slowly, leggings and a cashmere sweater from the closet, both slightly too large, and made her way downstairs, following coffee she could smell from the second floor. Raphael was at the kitchen island, reading something on a tablet, sleeves rolled to the elbow, utterly unbothered by the morning in the way of people who've never had to be afraid of a new day. He looked up when she came in. How do you feel? Sore. She hesitated in the doorway. Better than yesterday. Sit. She did. Camila appeared with a plate, eggs, fruit, toasted bread with butter, and disappeared again. Raphael pushed a coffee across the island toward her. She wrapped both hands around it and waited for the part where something was required of her. It didn't come. Raphael finished what he was reading, set the tablet aside, and looked at her fully. I need to ask you some things, he said. Personal things. You don't have to answer anything you're not ready for. She nodded. How long was your father hurting you? Since I was 16. She said it without inflection. Practiced flatness. After my mother left. And before that? Before that he ignored me. I belonged to her. After she was gone she paused. I was in the way. Raphael's jaw moved slightly. Once. Did anyone ever ask? He said. Teachers. Friends. Anyone? I didn't have friends. Not really. She looked at the coffee. And my father is Daniel Hayes. Respectable. Connected. People don't ask questions about men like him. No, Raphael said quietly. They don't. A beat of silence. What happens to him now? She asked. That depends. Raphael leaned back. Your father's problems are bigger than you know. He hasn't just borrowed from me. There are 6 other creditors. He's been falsifying accounts, running schemes, moving money through shells. It's all unraveling. He will fall. A pause. The question is how far, how public, how much he loses. Some of that I can control. Sophia stared at him. Why would you let me have any say in that? Because it's your life he gambled with. Raphael held her gaze. So what do you want, Sophia? The words landed strangely. What do you want? Not, what do you need? Not, here's what's going to happen. Not, you don't get a choice in this. What do you want? She opened her mouth. Closed it. I don't know, she finally said. Nobody's ever asked me that before. Raphael nodded slowly. Like that answer was the one he'd expected. Like it told him everything. Then we'll wait, he said. Until you do. A week passed. Then another. Sophia settled into the estate the way a wild animal settles into unexpected shelter, cautiously, always half ready to run, mapping every exit before she allowed herself to breathe. The house had rhythms she learned to read. Raphael left early, returned unpredictably. When he was home, he worked. When he wasn't working, he was in the library, a room she discovered on day 3 and quietly claimed as her own. Floor-to-ceiling shelves. Rolling ladders. Reading chairs worn soft at the corners. The particular hush of a room that took books seriously. Raphael found her there on the 9th day, curled in one of the chairs with a novel she wasn't actually reading. He settled at the desk without comment, opened a file, and worked. She pretended to read. It was the most comfortable silence she'd experienced in years. You never told me why, she said, eventually. He looked up. Why you actually took me in. The real reason. She set the book down. You said you don't help people. You said you're not a good man. So why am I here? Raphael was quiet for a long moment. He closed the file. When I was 19, he said, my father traded my sister to pay a gambling debt. Sophia went still. Her name was Lucia. She was 16. She wanted to study architecture. She used to draw buildings on any paper she could find. Napkins, receipts, the backs of envelopes. He paused. The man who took her kept her for 4 months. He was careful at first. Patient. Then one night he wasn't patient anymore. The fire crackled in the corner. She came back to us, he said. But she wasn't the same. Couldn't be, after that. She died 14 months later. She chose to. I'm sorry, Sophia said. The words felt inadequate. She said them anyway. My father died 5 years after her. Drunk, alone, still owing money to men who'd long since written him off. Raphael's voice was level, but something underneath was old and razor-edged. The man who hurt Lucia, I found him eventually. It took time. I needed to build enough power to reach him. Did you? Yes. No hesitation. No shame. She should have been afraid. She wasn't. She just looked at him, this controlled, dangerous man who had built an empire partially so he could reach the one person who deserved to be reached, and understood something fundamental about the shape of him. You're not doing this to be good, she said slowly. No. You're doing this because you couldn't do it for her. Raphael looked at her for a moment. Something moved behind his eyes. Not pain exactly. Something denser than pain. Don't make me into something I'm not, he said quietly. I'm not. Sophia held his gaze. I'm just telling you what I see. The fire settled. Rain began against the windows, the same rain that had been falling the night she arrived, cycling back like the world was circling something it hadn't finished yet. Raphael picked up the file again. But he didn't open it. The call came on a Thursday. Sophia was in the kitchen when Camila found her, face carefully composed in the way of someone delivering news they wish they weren't. Mr. Cortez asked me to find you. There's something you need to hear. Raphael was in his office. 3 other men were there, men Sophia had seen moving through the house quietly, men whose job she understood without being told. One of them was on a phone. Another was at a laptop. The third stood by the door. Raphael looked up when she entered. Your father went to the press, he said simply. Sophia blinked. What? This morning. An interview with the Tribune. He's claiming you were taken against your will. That I kidnapped you. A pause. He's framing it as a rescue operation. Himself as the concerned parent trying to get his daughter back. The absurdity of it hit her like cold water. He handed me to you, she said. He drove me here himself. Yes. He hit me. He's been hitting me for. Yes, Raphael said again. Calm. Steady. We know. She looked at the men in the room. The laptop. The phone still pressed to someone's ear. What are you doing? Preparing. He gestured to a chair. Sit, if you want. This concerns you more than anyone. She sat. Raphael's man on the phone was pulling something, financial records, it became clear as she listened. Account trails. Transfer histories. The kind of paper trail that a man like Daniel Hayes thought he buried deeply enough to never surface. He hadn't buried it deeply enough. He made a mistake, Raphael said quietly, watching her face. Going public means everything comes public. He thought it would protect him, generate sympathy, put me on defense. He didn't consider that going public is a two-way door. What does that mean for me? Sophia asked. It means you have a choice to make. And you need to make it now. He leaned forward slightly. You can stay quiet. Let the legal process work, it will, eventually, but it's slow and messy. Or, he paused. You can speak. Speak. Your story. Your voice. What he did, for how long, on record. A beat. It ends him faster. Completely. No recovery, no image rehabilitation, no quiet settlement. But it costs you too. It means becoming visible when you've spent years learning to disappear. Sophia looked at the table. She thought about the car ride. The thin dress. Fix your face. The door closing behind him without a backward glance. She thought about what it had cost her to disappear. Whether the price of visibility could possibly be higher. If I speak, she said slowly, who controls the story? You do, Raphael said. That's the only version I'm interested in running. She looked up at him. Then I'll speak, she said. And for the first time, the shaking was gone. It moved faster than Sophia had expected. Within 48 hours of Raphael's team releasing the financial records, quietly, selectively, to 3 specific journalists known for accuracy over sensation, the story shifted. What had been a kidnapping narrative became something else entirely. Account irregularities. Shell companies. Names attached to money that shouldn't have been moving the way it was moving. Daniel Hayes held a second press conference on Friday. By Friday evening, Two of his business partners had issued statements distancing themselves. By Saturday morning, a federal inquiry had been announced. Sophia watched it from the library, laptop open, reading every article twice. There was something surreal about watching a story she'd lived from the inside become public property. Words like abuse and fraud and victim placed next to her father's photograph, next to his polished smile. She'd expected to feel more. Triumph, maybe, or grief, or the particular satisfaction of justice. What she felt was quiet. Like something that had been coiled tight for years was slowly, carefully releasing. Raphael found her that evening. "How are you?" he asked. Not "how are you handling it," not "are you okay," just the simple, direct version. "I don't know yet," she said honestly. "Ask me in a week." He sat in the chair across from her. Didn't push. Didn't fill the silence with reassurance she hadn't asked for. "He's going to try to contact me," Sophia said. "Isn't he?" "He already tried. This morning." Raphael's voice was even. He was redirected. She looked at him. "You screened my calls." "My people did. I told them to flag anything from his numbers and let you decide if you wanted to engage." He met her eyes. "Not block. Flag. Your choice." She thought about that. "I don't want to talk to him," she said. "Then you don't." Just like that. Just like that. She closed the laptop. Looked out the window at the grounds, gray afternoon light, the first hints of autumn in the leaves. She'd arrived in rain and somehow a season had started turning without her noticing. "Can I ask you something?" she said. "Yes." "What do you get out of this?" "Actually." Not the Lucia reason, not the moral code. She looked at him directly. "What does Rafael Cortez get out of protecting a woman he has no obligation to?" He was quiet for a moment. Then, "A reason to be something other than what I built myself to be." The honesty of it landed differently than she'd expected. No performance. No deflection. Just a man who had spent years being exactly what was necessary and had found, unexpectedly, in the middle of someone else's disaster, something that felt like a door. Sophia didn't say anything. But she didn't look away either. And in the quiet of the library, with the afternoon light going amber around them, something between them settled into a new shape. Not safe, exactly. Not simple. But real. 3 weeks after the night her father drove her through iron gates and left her behind, Sophia Hayes sat across from a federal attorney in Rafael Cortez's dining room and told her story from the beginning. Everything. The first time she was 15 and her father's hand connected with her face over a report card. The years of calibrating herself around his moods. The bruises she'd covered with sleeves in summer. The morning she'd overheard the phone call that told her she was being traded. The dress. The car. The way he'd said after tonight, "You're his problem," the flatness of it, like she was a line item being transferred to a new ledger. She spoke for 2 hours. The attorney, a woman named Carver, took notes without expression. Professional. But once, just once, she looked up from her notepad and held Sophia's gaze and said, quietly, "You should have been protected a long time ago." It wasn't an apology from the system. It wasn't even a promise. But it was something. Raphael sat in the hall throughout. She knew because she checked, once, through the half-open door. He was just there. Not hovering. Not listening. Just present. In the specific way she'd come to recognize as his version of support, not intrusive, not absent. Available. After Carver left, Sophia sat for a long time at the empty dining table. Raphael came in eventually, set a cup of tea in front of her, sat down. "You didn't have to do that," he said. "I know. Most people wouldn't have. Most people haven't been waiting 6 years for someone to ask them what they want." She wrapped her hands around the mug. "Turns out when you finally know the answer, It's not that complicated. What was the answer? She looked at him. I want to stop disappearing. She said it simply, like a fact she'd uncovered and now just had to live inside. I've been making myself small my entire life because it was safer. Because the alternative was getting hit harder. A pause. I don't want to do that anymore. Raphael nodded. You don't have to. I know that now. She held his gaze. Because of you. Not because you saved me, I want to be clear about that. You didn't save me. Something shifted in his expression. Almost, something like a question. You gave me the first room I've ever been in where no one needed anything from me, she said. That's different from saving. That's just space. Room to find out what I actually am when nobody's hurting me. She paused. I found out. What did you find? She almost smiled. Someone worth protecting, she said. The silence that followed was the warmest thing she'd ever sat inside. Raphael looked at her for a long moment. Then, quietly, yes. She is. Daniel Hayes was arrested on a Tuesday. Sophia found out through a news alert on her phone, a small notification, almost modest in its brevity, considering the 6 years of damage it represented. Prominent businessman Daniel Hayes taken into federal custody on charges of financial fraud, tax evasion, and... She put the phone down before she finished reading. She didn't need to finish it. She already knew. She was in the garden when Raphael found her. She'd started going out there in the mornings, something about the open air, the groundedness of soil and the ordinary stubbornness of plants surviving autumn. One of the groundskeepers, an older man named Tomas, had been quietly teaching her what grew where, what needed sun, what survived in shadow. She'd started to love it in a way she couldn't entirely explain. Maybe because things grew here without being forced. Raphael stood at the edge of the path, hands in his jacket pockets. He waited for her to acknowledge him. She'd noticed that about him. He always waited. You saw, he said. Yes. She looked at the flower bed. Is it strange that I feel almost nothing? No. I thought I'd want to celebrate. Or cry. Or, she shook her head. I just feel like I put something down that I'd been carrying so long I forgot it wasn't mine to carry. He came and stood beside her. That's what it feels like when it's over, he said. Real things don't announce themselves. She looked at him sideways. Is that experience talking? Yes. She turned to face him. What about you? When all of this is settled, my father's case, the public story, what happens to you? What do you mean? I mean, she gestured vaguely at the estate, the grounds, the whole architecture of his life. This isn't your normal. A woman healing in your library. Federal attorneys at your dining table. Whatever this is. No, he agreed. It's not. So. He looked at her for a moment. His face was as still as ever, but she'd learned to read beneath the stillness. She'd learned the small signs, the slight change in his jaw, the way his eyes moved. So nothing, he said. You can stay. You can go. You can build something new, and you should, Sophia. You should build everything you were supposed to have. A pause. But if you wanted to stay, and figure out what this is, I wouldn't pretend I don't want that. It was the most unguarded thing she'd ever heard from him. She turned back to the garden. Let the honesty sit. I'm not the same person who arrived here, she said finally. No, he agreed. Neither am I. The morning light was clear and pale. Tomas was working somewhere nearby, the quiet sound of pruning, the small industry of things being tended. Sophia reached out and broke a dead stem from a rosebush. Made room for new growth. Then let's find out who we are now, she said. And for the first time in longer than she could remember, she meant every word of her own future. Sophia Hayes arrived at those iron gates believing she had no value. That her only purpose was to absorb damage and ask for nothing. That the world had decided what she was worth, and the number was very low. She left, or rather, she chose to stay, as someone who had looked the worst version of her life directly in the face and refused to let it be the final word. Rafael Cortez was not a hero. He would tell you that himself. He ran an organization built on shadow and leverage and the particular currency of fear. He had done things that couldn't be undone. But he had also drawn a line. A line that said, not this. Never this. And when a woman arrived at his door carrying years of damage wrapped in a thin dress on a rainy night, he chose which side of that line to stand on. Sometimes the most powerful thing in the world isn't the money or the influence or the fear. It's a room with a door that locks from the inside. It's someone asking, what do you want? It's being seen, fully, and not flinched at. That's what changed everything. If this story moved you, if you've ever felt invisible, disposable, or like your voice was the last thing anyone wanted to hear, this one was for you. Like this video. Subscribe. Because the next story, it hits even harder. And you don't want to miss where we go next.